This SU-76 has no washes or weathering yet because I wanted to show you the power of a good base coat. But first, we have to build it. I picked up this Tamiya kit expecting the usual fun and easy build, but things quickly took a turn. First of all, I want to give you a little bit of backstory on how I originally was going to present this build. I was actually going to try and paint this model without a base coat and show you the importance of it that way. But you can see from some of these parts, there are ejector pins all over the place, which wasn't going to be that big of a deal because I was going to show you exactly how to remove them, as I will in a few seconds. But my biggest problem came with the tracks. I don't know if the plastic is different or my glue is getting old, but boy, did those things not want to come together. The rest of the parts were fine, and the figures included are actually quite nice, but we'll save those for another video. And after reviewing the instructions, pretty standard Tamiya fare, it was time to start the build. You can see here, because this vehicle has an interior that is exposed, the injector pin marks have to go somewhere, so that took a lot of cleaning. However, some of this cleaning had to be done on actual detailed parts. So I went through a few ways of dealing with them. First, I used a series of sanding sponges. Then I scraped with a knife and followed that up with a fiberglass pencil that I used to scrub away the remaining details that I didn't want there. This worked really well. It was one of the first times I actually used a pencil like this. Like I said, my original plan was to put a clear primer on all of this and show you the power of weathering. But I decided to do this instead. Here I am just using some of the kit handles to show you that you don't always have to use metal. And then it was back to filling holes. This time with just regular gray Tamiya putty. Then it was just time to figure out all the rest of the details. I started with making sure the gun barrel was nice and straight. Added a few little details like cut lines before gluing all the pieces of the gun together. Also, I believe it had a cast muzzle, so I put some detail on that as well. And that was almost all of the detail on the gun. The saw was lacking a little bit of detail, so I cut in some of the teeth to just make that pop a little bit more. It actually shows up better later. And I moved on to the tracks. It comes with this really nifty jig that you can hold the tracks together with, but I just kept having tracks fall apart. No matter how long I waited, it just wasn't coming together. Also, these wheels would not fit and stay, so I had to use some super tack to keep those in place, which wasn't a problem, but that took a lot longer than it should have. I did have some extra track though, so I could put some other little details on there. I did notice the horn, I believe this is mounted incorrectly. It should be pointed backwards. That's what I saw in all the reference material. So that is an easy fix, but something I thought I would point out in case you are building this as well. That should go that way instead of how it was put there, from what I can tell. I also added some brackets to this tank since it's going to be in Berlin, and I have some cool reference photos showing some with these brackets on there. And then I replaced the rope that is supplied with the kit with some metal one just to make it look a little bit better. And that was the build done. Held together with some more super tack so I could take it all apart and paint it. Which, as you can see, comes apart into quite a few pieces. Then I almost forgot I needed to put some weld beads on some of the pieces of the gun, which have some pretty good gaps in them, and just a little bit of green stuff. I just filled in those areas. I didn't do any scraping of the welds that were already there. I just went over those textures just because Russian welds are usually kind of beefy, and I thought this would be a better detail to see, so I didn't waste my time scraping anything off. I just went right over the existing and used a hobby blade to cut in those textures. But now is time for what we've all been waiting for, the actual painting. So after priming everything in black, I started with Russian Dark Base from MIG, and I basically just painted this everywhere there would be shadow. So all the lower part of the hull and any of the interior that would have been darker, that the sun wouldn't have hit as much, and the underside and the part of the gun that is in the cabin. Also, I left these panels off because of the detail. That's why everything had to come apart the way it did. Next, I went with the green base, also by MIG. This all comes in a set, and I did a cloudy pattern on all of the other surfaces. So I didn't worry about the highlight areas yet. I just went over everything that wasn't painted with the dark base with the regular green base. But you can see I'm leaving a lot of the primer in all the shadow areas. So when I go back and do my weathering, I'll already have a roadmap where the shadows should be. This is going to make life a lot easier, and as you can see from the beginning, it gives you a lot more depth already in the base coat. Here I'm just using that on the wheels as well, because even though they're lower, they stick out, so we do it that way. Here we are with the Russian light base. And you can see I'm using a piece of paper here so I can create some hard edges. This doesn't have to be anything fancy, and it doesn't need to be perfect. You don't need to tape it or anything like that. A little bit of overspray is fine, but you want to hit all those hard edges with a little bit of a line. It'll really help make all of those edges pop. So now you can see this 3-paint system has really kind of changed from a solid base coat to something with a little bit more interest. We have to do the same thing with the inside, and I'm going to just change the highlighting a little bit less aggressive. I'm going to go back to the green base because we had everything base coated with the dark color. So now we're using the highlight a little bit more as the shade lower, one shade lower for that. But we will put some highlights in here just on the edges for those hard to reach areas. This I did mask because I don't want that spray going everywhere. And now you can see I'm just edge highlighting, which is something you see in a lot of miniature painting, all those little edges. But this is on a wet palette, so that paint is thinned down, so it will spread a little bit, so it'll look a little less harsh once it is dry. Now this is going to be ready for all the other detail painting that we're going to do after. So we're going to do the same thing on the outside of the hull. We're just going to hit all of those rivets and things like that. You can see we're not edge highlighting, but I'm just hitting all the rivets and things that stick out. Now for base coating silver, I love this Alclad chrome. I do brush paint it. I think it's thinned for an airbrush, I believe, but I don't really love spraying it with all the metallics. But brush painting is fine. It lays really smooth. Really great product. Also did the inside of the light with that. see when the clear glass goes over it. It's very convincing. Now it's time for all the wood handles. So again, we're going to use a base coat. It doesn't have to be this dark flesh. It could be a wood color. That's just what I have because I have a lot of paints for painting figures now. But any light beige color. Then use a brown to just draw in some streaks. And this does not have to be perfect. You're going to use some washes after this. Now I just used brown wash. And then I go back over and highlight with the original base color again. Doing a little bit more of the edge highlighting on the interior. And you can see how the wood blocks and handles worked out there. Now for all the metal, it was just base coated in the black, and I just like to use a pencil and just use that graphite to pull out that metal look, because I don't want it to be as shiny as the chrome, and I find some gunmetal paints are a little hard to thin down to the consistency that I like. So I'm just fine using the graphite, really works, and you can buff it to be a little shinier if you'd like for things like the teeth that get used more. For the rust, we're going to do just another 3 paint process again. We're going to base coat it first, obviously in the darkest color, and then stippling lighter rusts on top. I know a lot of people work reverse, but if you're uncomfortable with that process, this is a pretty easy way to get really convincing results. Again, this is just the base coat, so you can go over things with washes and things like that after. But I really like to just base coat things first so I know where my roadmap for the oil paints is going to go. For the tracks, I watered down deck tan, again on a wet palette, and this looks really bright now, but as it dries, it's going to be a little more subtle. I did another wash to pull out all of the detail, and then lighter washes of orange brown, and then went back over all of the contact points with the graphite pencil again. And I will add more dust and things to this, but I just wanted to show you what base coating can do without much of a pin wash. I know the tracks kind of have a pin wash on them, but nothing else does. Well, I know this was a little bit of a different video, but I really wanted to show you the power of a good base coat. I really hope this helps you in your future builds. Next video, we're going to weather this till our heart's content. But until then, all I can say is thanks for watching. See ya.